Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I want to talk to you guys about the Treaty of 1213 and the belief that the Vatican owns the world. Now, I've found a couple stipulations in this. I found one or two good articles, and I pulled up a couple of U.S. law codes which show some pretty interesting situations. So, there won't be any fancy pictures on this one, but there will be facts. As always, folks, you decide. And as always, folks, I try to bring you the most up-to-date information, the best resources that I can find, and everything else. Now, I want to start off by telling you a couple of the strange things that happened to me last night when I tried to put this up, because it's quite strange what did actually happen. And that was me plugging in my battery. Last night I was looking at topics to put up, and this morning I went to my computer. My computer would log to the account screen, but the password was frozen. I'm using Windows 10. I thought that was funny. It shut down multiple times, and I was holding F8, F9, F10. I kept tapping it like that, and finally it got to a point where I could actually get to the password part, type in my password, and get to my computer. Another thing, I went to the gym earlier. I came back and I couldn't find my mic. My headset that I'm wearing that makes me sound clear, I couldn't find that, folks. I looked and it was across the room on top of the radio, and best of my knowledge, folks, nobody was in the house but me at the time. Alright? Okay. Now that we have the weird stuff going on, I'd like to start addressing a couple issues with this. The first issue, ladies and gentlemen, and I noticed my location sign, your location is currently in use, which is weird, on my Windows 10 when I specifically have that disabled. So I don't like the fact that that's on, but it is. Now it just went off, oddly enough. So, as you can imagine, folks, this is being recorded on multiple ends. The Treaty of 1213, folks, is basically the start of where a one-world government had actually happened, or at least has believed to be where the Vatican owns the majority of everything, or if not everything in and of itself. It's supposed to own the land, the laws, the people, the cattle, everything. There's one problem. I could not find an exact Treaty of 1213. I found a nice narrative, which I'm going to share with you. And I found several support documents which it told me to reference, and I did. So let me get into this, because it's actually quite interesting. I wrote down some notes. And basically, this starts off in 1066. Where the people of England held alliadial title to their land, and basically, in William the Conqueror in 1066 stole the king's title and took the land from the people. William I, from William I, 1066 to King John 1199, England was in dire straits. It was bankrupt. Crusades, any number of things, you guys get the idea. The king invoked a law of mortmain, or mortmain, the dead man's hand, basically. So the king couldn't pass their land, the people rather, couldn't pass their land onto the church or anyone else without the king's permission. Sort of like modern day probate. So, the Vatican didn't like this, because the king owed a lot of pounds to the Vatican. And King John supposedly didn't like the Vatican's representative, Langton, who was... Who? Exactly. Bishop of Canterbury, I believe. No, yeah, Bishop of Canterbury, of Pope Innocent III, who the Pope put there to basically deal with King John, who didn't really know what he was doing. So in 1208, England was placed under the papal interdict. Interdict means prohibition. In other words, basically like modern day schooling, we will now watch you, we will now watch your titles, we will now watch your land, we will now basically what they did is they acted as a financial manager of today, folks. And this actually kind of went on and on and on. And King John was eventually excommunicated for basically trying to regain his statue, and he groveled before the Pope, returned his title to his kingdoms of England and Ireland, and the Pope as vassals. Basically swore submission, loyalty to Pope. King John accepted Langton as the Archbishop of Canterbury and offered the Pope a vassal's bond of, fealty and homage. July of 1213, King John was absolved of the excommunication at Winchester by the returned Archbishop of Canterbury, Langton. On October 3 of 1213, by a treaty of... I'll get to the good stuff in a minute, folks. I just got to get down to a certain part where I can start talking. I'm just trying to give you good history here. On October 3 of 1213, by treaty of King John, ratified the surrender of his kingdoms to the Pope as Victor of Christ, who claimed ownership of everything and everyone on earth as tradition. And basically... Okay, so basically the situation went on, and the contract of 1213 was between two parties. Now the barons of England would not put up being slaves anymore, so they took to the sword and made King John sign the Magna Carta. So this was kind of in violation of this, and this is under... The first part, rather, is under... When he signed over all the lands to the Pope, that was one situation. I believe that's even under your rights in modern UCC 1-207 and 103, but I'll get into this later. The main part here, folks, is I want to get down to about... Okay, I have another 3 little parts, and then I can basically talk to you guys about what part actually means what. Basically, the contract of the Treaty of 1213 was between two parties. Now the barons of England would not put up with being slaves. I already read this, I know, I apologize. But I'm trying to get to the good part here. And so basically, the Treaty of 1213, from what I understand, was between the King of England and all his properties and the Pope and all his properties. And the Pope basically came in and got everything now, and now it's under principle of the Catholic Church. So basically, King John had to sign the Magna Carta. Magna Carta was between the king, all his properties, quote unquote, and all the barons of England. So doesn't this act of the barons violate the principle of natural law when they created the Magna Carta as having no force and effect upon the contract between two parties? Probably. But it says here that the Pope Innocent III and the contracting party thought so, for he declared the Magna Carta to be unlawful and unjust, as it is base and shameful, whereby the Apostolic See, okay, understand here, is brought into contempt, the royal prerogative, diminished England, outraged, and whole enterprise of the crusade greatly imperiled. Okay, fine. No big deal. We're talking about quoting from G.R.C. Davis, Magna Carta, trustee of the British Museum, 1965. We don't care about that. So basically, they did this, and what happened was, along with this treaty of 1213, which operated under King John and Pope the Innocent III of 1213, they now come to the Americas. Okay. And this is the part where it gets interesting, folks. Now, the part you need to understand is there's two different parts of the Holy See, which today it's only recognized as one, and I wonder whether or not it's ever actually recognized as two. The Holy See of Antioch and the Holy See of Alexandria. Where above here it mentioned the apostolic Holy See or whatever it was. But it's kind of weird how you read this and there's like 2 or 3 Holy Sees mentioned. And you wonder just how many versions of itself they have just in case one might fall or something else. And next part I'm going to get in because it deals with the Americas and the colonies. And I'm trying to bring this to you as quickly as I can with limited information. And I could have just put it out there with text, and I decided not to because it's kind of important that you know this. Okay, so now we have basically the Holy See of the Antioch and the Holy See of Alexandria. Holy See of Antioch, the Eastern Orthodox Church ruled all the easternly side of the world. The Holy See of Alexandria ruled the western side of the world. And so now we have basically 3 parties, England, the Holy See of Antioch, and Holy See of Alexandria, that are basically competing for some type of power struggle. So basically it goes on to describe the Americas' claim to dominion over land by deceiving the natives, the American Indians. And the king operated under a treaty of 1210, and everything was going along until the 1770s, when a bunch of people called the Founding Fathers of the Americas decided they wanted to benefit, but by not paying the taxes to the king. They, being lawyers and professional educated men, didn't know they were still under the Pope's control. And this is basically affect the American colonies and the people who lived on the land. The common people who fought in the American Revolution were unaware that the Treaty of 1210 still ruled, despite the fact they thought the Magna Carta was a viable piece of work. So understand, in the Vatican law, in the Holy See's eyes, folks, the Magna Carta does not exist. Your Declaration of Bill of Rights was based on the fundamental principles in the English Declaration, of the English Declaration of Rights, based on the Magna Carta and various things of that sort. So basically what happened here is that basically none of that really worked. None of that was worth anything at this point. It's all under Treaty of 1213, and there's a nice piece in there that I'm going to get to in a minute that basically says if this violates, Treaty XYZ, everything else is underscored and, nothing is viable. And, okay, so right now we're at the point of the Magna Carta being basically a worthless document. And they believe that the Magna Carta was a viable piece of work. The Declaration of Rights in 1689 declared the rights of the British subjects in England. At the end of the English Declaration, it stated in Section 3, so go ahead and look this up, because this is one part I did not actually look up because I'm not English. Therefore, I did not look this up, but this is actually very important. I'll repeat it. In 1689, declared the rights of the British subjects in England. At the end of the English Declaration, it stated in Section 3, so find Section 3 of that should any of the rights justified mentioned be in violation of the Holy Alliance, the 1213 Treaty, that's what it's called, the Holy Alliance 1213 Treaty, look that up. I'll repeat it. Basically, the Magna Carta was junk. In 1689, they declared the rights of the British subjects in England. And basically, the English Declaration was signed, and basically, under Section 3 of the English Declaration of 1689, it was declared that should any of the rights just mentioned be in violation of the Holy Alliance 1213 Treaty, that being what it was called, it is as if the Declaration was never written. So that right then and there, folks, is basically the solve all, cure all, null and void all situation. Because if it is in violation of that, the Holy Alliance, the 1213 Treaty, it is as if the Declaration or any law, any statute, anything was never written. And I'm going to give you U.S. law code from U.S. government sources which say that there was a conference in 1963 which basically re-ratified all of this to modern day. And it isn't going to basically say this, but it is going to do this, and if you look that up, it will go back to this and several other things. You just got to find the right paperwork, and I've only been able to find so much, and I only want to put up so much because of my own safety and everything else, especially what's happened today. I do kind of fear for my life a little bit, especially for getting involved in this. I mean, this isn't even, to me, this is law stuff. This has nothing to do with the Vatican or saying it's shameful or anything else, but this is basically it. So going back to the story, and I'm almost to the part where you're going to want to see this. So we know that the English Declaration didn't fly. We know that the Magna Carta was junk. And we know that the Holy Alliance, the Treaty of 1213, is the law of the land, and that was the first international rule of law, international private law, as it will be called basically nowadays, of Rome and everything else. And basically this is what you're looking for. So, okay, I'll just reread it. So we know that the English Declaration didn't fly, and makes you think that the 1774 Declaration of Rights in the British colony would work. Weren't these people doing the same thing as the barons did in 1215 AD to King John? A contract is a contract. Now, you might want to look this up. Look at Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. Can anyone obligate a contract? Were the Founding Fathers trying to obligate a contract between two parties that still have their heirs living today? Good question. Okay. Now, this is the meat and potatoes here, folks. I'm going to try to get this through to you as quickly as I can, because this is important to the United States. That last part was important to the English. I know I got a lot of buddies from the UK that watch this. Please look that up. When I show this, I will show that part, and you can look it up and everything else, and I'll provide these sources and everything else. This next part's very important. So, we're moving on to modern day now. And in modern day, in the United States law, public law, it references Law 88-244, Public Law 88-244, which follows Public Law 88-243, the institution of the law, Merchants Uniform Commercial Code, this and that. And it basically says, are you shocked that the Pope is listed in this public law? Now, I see something for the 244, but I do not see anything for the 244, if that makes any sense. The 244 I do, 243 I don't. However, when you look at the very bottom of both, it all basically says the same thing as the Holy Alliance clause here, that should any rights just be mentioned in the violation of the Holy Alliance 1213 Treaty, is if the Declaration was never written, and I'll show you that in a minute. So this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to switch over to this. This is what I'm showing you, folks. Okay, this is the part here that I want you to see. This is the part all my British folks should read right here. Okay, you're looking for the Declaration of Rights of 1689, declared the British subjects in England, and you're looking for the English Declaration stated in Section 3. And basically it'll say that should any of the rights just mentioned and be in violation of the Holy Alliance 1213 Treaty, it is as if the Declaration was never written. Now, I understand now why this is not in common law in the United States, because we did not have this in 1213 because America wasn't even a colony in 1213. Therefore, the Holy Alliance did not actually permit to us because we were a separate state from Great Britain. So that is why we don't have any references to the Holy Alliance's 1213 in our public law that I'm aware of. But I will show you something very interesting here, folks. Let me make sure I'm... So this up here is what you need to look up. This is what I provided for you down here. Sorry. Okay, so this says we need you to reference Public Law 88244 and Public Law 88243. So what I did was... Hang on, I'll go up here. Hang on. Okay, this is a U.S. government publishing office, folks, keeping America informed. Okay? Here's the URL. You'll get this. I guarantee it. Okay? Document content. You can download the PDFs, whatever in the hell, I don't care. I apologize, I do care. But I'll show you what you need to look at in a minute. So, here is the public laws. Here's how you use it, okay? 88-3, 88-4. We're looking for 88-243 and 88-244. I already have them up, I know, but I'm just showing you how to reference them. Because this is actually very, very, very important. Hang on, why did it stop? Okay. I'm sure it says something amazing there. But basically here, I went over, I apologize. Where is it? Oh, here we go. My bad. I apologize. I went over. Okay, so this is, oddly enough, folks, I did not highlight this. This is that 88-243 that they wanted you to reference. 88-243, 88-244. Oddly enough, the U.S. government, folks, has actually highlighted this, which is very, very weird. Now, this is basically the part I love. Okay. Now, this is how you know that they're trying to work in some things versus others. Public Law 88-244. And I love this part behind here because it says the following British statute shall no longer have any force or effect in British Columbia, in the District of Columbia. 9 and 10 of William III, that's the one we were talking about, folks. And that was in place in 1698, I believe. And that carried over from John. Chapter 17, Section 3, DC Code, you get the idea. You get the idea. Okay, here's the part down here, folks, that's important. And this is basically what your English Holy Alliance Treaty said. This is it in a nutshell, folks. This is it right here. And this is interesting. I'd love you guys to look this up for me. What this is from is called the Hague Conference on Private International Law of December 30, 1963. That's when they basically made it, I guess, completely legal to list this as in the public law. But basically this is what it says. To provide for participation by the government of the United States in the Hague Conference on Private International Law and International Rome Institute for the Unification of Private Law and the authorizing appropriations thereof, resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, the President is hereby authorized to accept the membership of the Government of the United States in 1. The Hague Conference on Private International Law, and 2. The International Rome Institute for the Unification of Private Law, and they appoint the United States delegates and their alternates to meetings of the two organizations and committees and organs thereof. Section 2. There is authorized to be appropriate such sums as may be necessary, not to exceed, which I'm sure this number is way higher now, $25,000 annually for the payment by the United States for one, its proportionate share of the expense of the Hague Conference on Private International Law and the International Rome Institute for the Unification of Private Law, and two, all other necessary expenses incident to participation by the United States in the activities by the two governments or of the two governments organizations referred to in Clause 1 of this section, approved December 30, 1963. So that's basically like our, and I'll go back over here and show you. Oh, my bad, one more. That's basically like saying that should any of the rights just mentioned be in violation of the Holy Alliance 1213 Treaty, it is as if the Declaration was never written. That's basically our clause now. And I showed you that on the... Let's see here. This is the 244. Don't do that, don't do that. Ah, crud. Hang on, one sec. Alright, guys. So, this is the Public Law 88243. And basically, you're supposed to be able to find in here, and I can't figure out where. And I read the part that this guy wanted me to read, and what it said to read. And I'm not finding out where this names the Pope in all this here in the 243. So, I'm trying to get to the point here. Obligation of good faith. This and that. We want what's called the... I know exactly where it is, folks. Hang on. Nope, not the adjustment of the contract. We want down here more. I know that it's not going to say the Pope in big bold letters, but let's look. Here we go. General obligations, contract. Make it bigger. Okay, let's look for what this guy actually told me to, or says to look for. It says, coming down here, right about here. So it says, look in 88243, Merchants Uniform Commercial Code, that would be the United States. Are you shocked that the Pope is listed in this public law? Well, I'm not even certain where in this he's listed, because when I look down here, the only part... Oh, my bad. When I look down here, whether it's your 243 and your 244, or whether it's here, the only part that's listed, folks, is at the very bottom, which it was listed before. And basically it refers to Public Law 88244. So you go to Public 244 or 88244, and basically this is, I guess, where it says it should be listed. And this is the part here that should make some noise one way or another. And I will go ahead and I will show you this entire thing. Showing these is not copyright issues. So I can show this all day long. This is public knowledge. These are law codes. These are things you're supposed to know that nobody's really gone and told you about. So I read you the 88243, and this is the 88244, which is supposed to actually say this is the law for Columbia Code and everything else, and it's supposed to recognize and show the Pope and stuff of that sort, and it does down here where I showed you before on the 243. But basically up here, the 77 Stat Public Law 88244, December 30, 1963, page 777, effective date, and everything else, basically just says, except as provided by subsection C of this section, transactions and validity entered into before effective date specified by 16 of this Act, and the rights, duties, interests flowing from them remain valid thereafter, and may be terminated, completed, or consummated, or enforced as required or permitted by any statute or other law amended or repealed by this Act as though such repeal or amendment had not occurred. Basically going back to the, right here, the Holy Alliance Treaty of 1213, which is no doubt what they probably wrote in on their own piece. And it basically says that should any of the rights mentioned be in violation of the Holy Alliance of 1213 Treaty, it is as if the declaration has never been or was never written. And basically that's what our government, my bad folks, let me get over here. I'm not trying to get impartial with you. Oh, my bad, one more over. And that's basically what they're trying to say here in this one. And to go on and say the perfection of the security interest as defined by 28.1.201 District of Columbia Code, and however denominated in any law repealed by this Act, which was performed when this Act takes effect by a filing, refilling, recording under a law repealed by this Act, requiring a further filing, refilling, or recording to continue its performance or perfection, continue until and will lapse on the date provided by the law, so repealed for such further filing, refiling, or recording unless such case a continuation statement is filed in the office of Recorder of Deeds of the district. So you might want to go there and find out. You can find out whether or not we're still under 1213, which I imagine we are, but they're going to go down here to this part here, folks, and they're going to say, that doesn't exist. And then they have it filed under their own little law code, which is down here. So basically it says, yeah, we're no longer with the British, but this applies. And this basically goes back to right here. So it's all a bunch of junk, folks. That's all it is. And basically what this basically says is that we are under rule of Roman law. And the way you know that is basically going back over here and reading the rest of this. And the rest of this basically says the same thing. That supposedly everything does work and everything else. Now, this goes in past the okay, let me see here. This goes back basically into after the U.S. Revolution. Basically says, doesn't the United States have an ambassador to the Vatican? Why? Why is it government like all the other nations, France, Japan, Spain, Brazil? The Vatican runs the world. It controls the British crown. It's a wonder. But basically there's a church and a government. And it's basically to designate power. And it goes on and explains why the king and the Vatican and Adams and everybody else exist. And basically it says, look at Title 4 of the Constitution of the United States and answers a new history of America. And it basically refers to a 1783 treaty and says that the opening statement quoted exactly as it appears in English, it having pleased the divine providence to dispose of the hearts of the most serene and most potent prince, George III, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, Ireland, Defender of the Faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lauenburg, Arch-Treasurer and the Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire, and C of the United States of America, C being Corporation of the United States of America, emphasis added in caps. So basically, folks, what I want you to do is I want you to look up the Treaty of 1783, and it will basically say this part right here, and it will basically say we, at that point, were repurchased by the Pope via the Vatican, put back into the circle of things after the American Revolution, and after that, the 1213 Treaty was reinstated, basically. And it was basically going back to that should any of the rights just mentioned be in violation of the Holy Alliance of 1213 Treaty, as it is in declaration, was never written. And basically, I don't want to go into this big time, folks, but basically what this really comes down to, and there's a part in here that I really wanted to show you, but I don't know where it is at the moment. And it basically says how American law is directly based on the Vatican law and the private law thereof. And it basically goes on, it talks about 1822, Pope and the Vatican interests in the U.S. Republic, the secret Treaty of Verona, undersigned, specifically authorized some additions to the Treaty of the Holy Alliance, so there's that. Look at Article 1. Article 2. Article 3. And then it gets into basically what God's law is, what the Vatican is, basically saying, what you are as a steward of the Lord versus the Pope's power, and why, if things were the way they should be, you should be able to go into court and say, I'm a steward of the Pope. I demand that this law be unjust, and through the Lord's natural law, and King John, Pope, etc., along with everything else relating back to 1066, you should be able to get pretty much everything null and voided. But the U.S. Law Code does not go back because it's supposed to be separate and everything else. And basically, folks, this is the idea. You are, always have been, and always will be, supposedly, a member and owned by the Catholic Church. All your properties, basically via the Vatican or via the British Crown and everything else, are and always have been, at least in your lifetime, since about 1213 thereof, or the American colony founding, depending on what country you are in, has and always will be, basically. Under the rights and realm of the Vatican and the Catholic Church. However, what I want to stress are a couple of things. The first being that it was never specified in there the difference between the authority of the Holy See of Antioch, Holy See of Alexandria, and the Holy See now registered in Vatican City. I believe there are separate Holy Sees that basically have command authority over the area, and the Vatican basically rules by proxy. And if you read that main document, you will actually read that, and read that that is how basically Vatican law is assembled. They don't really do anything major. They kind of just let things flow. But they do control the banking. They do control this. They do control that. And they only really interdict and kind of come together when it's needed and they see a serious violation, folks. Presidents are getting ready to declare a country bankrupt like Greece. The Vatican basically has to come and they have to sign a bunch of paperwork. I believe when Greece was getting ready to file bankruptcy, I believe the Pope was actually there. And they talked about, how the Vatican wanted to help out with the gay rights and shit, basically to cover up. I apologize, gay rights are a very important issue. But the idea that this is way huger is monumental. And basically that everything else is way bigger. So I gave you the Holy Alliance of 1213. I gave you the Hague Conference of 1963. I gave you, was it the 1789 Treaty? I gave you like more than 3 or 4 or 5, and if you go through that listing, you will find a long list more of how basically the Vatican, the Holy See, where it is currently, and whether or not the Holy See of Antioch and Holy See of Alexandria still technically exist to choose between the east and the west side of the world, etc. Still own supposedly you, supposedly your cattle, supposedly your land, supposedly your properties, all through the proxy governments that they've set up. And they're off. I mean, just go ahead and go look, folks. You will see all this. It's amazing. But as always, folks, Treaty of 1213, Hague Conference 1963, Treaty 1213, etc. Vatican authority thereof, you decide. Thank you. That was me plugging in my battery. Last night I was looking at topics to put up, and this morning I went to my computer. My computer would log to the account screen, but the password was frozen. I'm using Windows 10. I thought that was funny. It shut down multiple times, and I was holding F8, F9, F10. I kept tapping it like that, and finally it got to a point where I could actually get to the password part, type in my password, and get to my computer. Another thing, I went to the gym earlier. I came back and I couldn't find my mic. My headset that I'm wearing that makes me sound clear, I couldn't find that, folks. I looked and it was across the room on top of the radio, and best of my knowledge, folks, nobody was in the house but me at the time. Alright? Okay. Now that we have the weird stuff going on. Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I want to talk to you guys about the Treaty of 1213 and the belief that the Vatican owns the world. Now, I've found a couple of stipulations in this. I found one or two good articles, and I pulled up a couple of U.S. law codes which show some pretty interesting situations. So there won't be any fancy pictures on this one, but there will be facts. As always, folks, you decide. And as always, folks, I try to bring you the most up-to-date information, the best resources that I can find, and everything else. Now, I want to start off by telling you a couple of the strange things that happened to me last night when I tried to put this up, because it's quite strange what did actually happen, and sort of like modern day probate. So the Vatican didn't like this because the king owed a lot of pounds to the Vatican, and King John supposedly didn't like the Vatican's representative, Langton, who was... Who? Exactly. Bishop of Canterbury, I believe. No, yeah. Bishop of Canterbury of Pope Innocent III. Who the Pope put there to basically deal with King John, who didn't really know what he was doing. So in 1208, England was placed under the papal interdict. Interdict means probation. In other words, basically like modern day schooling, we will now watch you, we will now watch your titles, we will now watch your land, we will now basically what they did is they acted as a financial manager of today, folks. Support documents which it told me to reference, and I did. So let me get into this because it's actually quite interesting. I wrote down some notes. And basically, this starts off in 1066, where the people of England held alliadial title to their land, and basically, and William the Conqueror in 1066 stole the king's title and took the land from the people. William the First, or from William I, 1066 to King John 1199, England was in dire straits. It was bankrupt. Crusades, any number of things, you guys get the idea. The king invoked a law of mortmain, or mortmain, the dead man's hand, basically. So the king couldn't pass their land, the people rather, couldn't pass their land onto the church or anyone else without the king's permission. And I'd like to start addressing a couple issues with this. The first issue, ladies and gentlemen, and I noticed my location sign, your location is currently in use, which is weird, on my Windows 10 when I specifically have that disabled. So I don't like the fact that that's on, but it is. Now it just went off, oddly enough. So as you can imagine, folks, this is being recorded on multiple ends. Treaty of 1213, folks, is basically the start of where a one world government had actually happened, or at least has believed to be where the Vatican owns the majority of everything, or if not everything in and of itself. It's supposed to own the land, the laws, the people, the cattle, everything. There's one problem. I could not find an exact treaty of 1213. I found a nice narrative, which I'm going to share with you. And I found several